Andrea didn't just laugh. She snorted. That awful, shrill sound she makes when she's had too much and thinks she's the funniest woman alive. It cut through the backyard chatter like a fork scraping a plate. "Who wants to trade for my husband?" she shouted. "He's low maintenance and totally useless." That was the moment everything froze. Kids were still running around, sure. The grill sizzled. But every adult within earshot did that polite social pause, where they weren't sure if they should chuckle or cringe. Marla, always the vulture, didn't miss a beat. "I'll take him," she purred, raising her wine glass. "When can I start?" More laughter. Real this time. The kind that stings. I flipped the burgers without saying a word. Just kept the same half-smile I've worn through 17 years of similar parties. Similar jokes. 17 years of being the butt of the gag. The dependable ghost. Not clever enough to be admired. Not reckless enough to be hated. Just there. She clinked glasses with Marla, sloshing Rose. "Seriously, she's braver than me." I didn't reply. And somewhere between the burnt hot dogs and the store-bought potato salad, something inside me stopped moving. Like a power switch flipped. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just quiet. Stillness. By the time Andrea passed out in the bedroom, half-dressed, TV humming, remote still in her hand, I was in the garage, shirt soaked in smoke and sweat, standing in front of a locked black Craftsman toolbox. She hasn't noticed it in years. Why would she? It's just one of the 100 things I maintain. Fix, patch, without thanks. My fingers hovered over the combination. I didn't open it. Not yet. Just stared at the faded sticker on the side. Property of P. L. Kavanaugh. Before I took her name. Before I got domesticated. If you're still reading this, do me a small favor. Subscribe. Over 97% of you don't, and it helps more than you think. Keep stories like this coming. Keeps us going. Back in the garage, I sat down on the cold cement floor, cross-legged like a kid in timeout. Around me, neatly labeled bins of bolts, washers with screws. I hadn't touched half of this stuff since we redid the kitchen. That was 5 years ago. I looked around, and it hit me. I'd built an entire house of quiet. Quiet chores. Quiet weekends. Quiet acceptance. And now, it was about to get loud in a very particular way. Not with shouting. Not with slammed doors. With decisions. At the barbecue, I'd noticed something Andrea didn't. The way Marla looked at me didn't quite match the joke. It wasn't pity. It was interest, which in its own way was worse. Because while Andrea laughed, Marla took notes. And so did I. I remembered who laughed, who avoided eye contact, who knew this wasn't a joke but laughed anyway because it was easier than calling out cruelty. My wife didn't just humiliate me. She taught me something. She showed me how alone I actually was, how replaceable she believed I'd become. And when someone shows you what you are in their eyes, you have two options. Beg to be seen differently or vanish. I didn't open the toolbox that night. I wasn't ready. But I did take my old phone out and power it down. The new one was already charging in the upstairs guest room, under a name she'd never recognize. The first domino hadn't just tipped. It had hit the floor with a satisfying thud. Andrea didn't notice a thing. She was too busy planning their July Lake trip, texting wine memes to her yoga group, and telling anyone who'd listen that Patrick had zero taste in anything that isn't beige. Patrick, meanwhile, woke at 6 o'clock sharp every day, brushed his teeth, mowed the lawn on Sundays, checked the mail. The usual. From the outside, it looked like he'd swallowed the joke, digested it, and kept marching. But on Monday, he walked into HR and requested part-time. Cited stress-related fatigue. He even nodded solemnly when they asked if it was medical. Nothing urgent. Just time to slow down. HR didn't ask many questions. He was, after all, Patrick. The guy who'd been there longer than the carpeting. Reliable. Quiet. No drama. That Thursday, he sat through a 3-hour estate planning seminar in a strip mall conference room next to a retired dentist and 2 nervous women with notepads. He wasn't taking notes. He was listening, cataloging options, trust structures, asset flow, quiet ways to move things without setting off alarms. He learned phrases like revocable versus irrevocable and contingent distribution. He smiled at the presenter like any bored retiree would. The next week, he bought a second phone under the name P. L. Kavanaugh and registered it to a P.O. box 30 minutes from home. Cash only. The clerk barely glanced at his ID. He used that phone for one thing: research, estate lawyers, asset shelters, property records. He started walking in neighborhoods he'd never visited before. Middle-class areas with modest homes and quiet backyards. He wasn't interested in upgrades. He was casing tranquility. And as he walked, he made mental notes. The Jacksons, who had chuckled too loud at the barbecue. The Colemans, who avoided looking at him during Andrea's punchline. The Thompsons, who said nothing, but whose smirks lingered. He catalogued them like tools in his workshop. Andrea, meanwhile, floated through the summer with her usual chaotic charm. Wine nights, pool selfies, more little stabs at his masculinity during dinner parties. "You know what Patrick said when I asked if these curtains matched the rug?" she said one night in front of guests. "Nothing, because he has no opinion. He's like Alexa, but less helpful." Everyone laughed. Patrick laughed too. Then excused himself to check on the sprinklers. He stood in the dark of the side yard, hands in pockets, eyes cold. He wasn't planning revenge. Not exactly. He was making space. Space between who she thought he was and who he actually is when no one's watching. The old Patrick would have moped, gone quiet for a day, maybe cooked her eggs as a peace offering. This Patrick bought a second set of keys. Rented a storage unit under the LLC she forgot existed. Started boxing up the parts of his life she never paid attention to. His childhood books, old photos, woodworking tools, the journals he never let her read. She noticed the guest room was cleaner. Thought he was finally getting organized. She had no idea the organization was her life unraveling in alphabetical order. He wasn't reacting anymore. He was rearranging, and she didn't even see the floor shifting beneath her heels. The LLC had been sitting dormant for 16 years. Originally, it was meant for a side hustle, custom wood signs, reclaimed furniture, that sort of thing. Patrick had registered it back when he still thought hobbies were something adults got to keep. Before Andrea helpfully convinced him it was childish. Before the garage became her storage overflow and the only thing he built anymore was IKEA furniture. But the paperwork was still good. The name still registered with the state. Kavanaugh Workshop, LLC. He filed the renewal, updated the mailing address to the P.O. box, and opened a new business checking account with it. The banker smiled and said, "Going back into business?" Patrick smiled back. "Just a quiet little project." He moved $200 at first, then $400, then a pattern of round numbers, $300 every Thursday, always under the threshold that would trigger Andrea's automated notifications from the bank. He had installed those alerts for her. Now he used them against her. Only kept joint money in joint spaces. Anything real, anything sharp went elsewhere. He sold his vintage watch collection through a private group on a collector forum. No eBay, no traceable auctions. Cash-only meetups in parking lots and coffee shops. Half the guys who bought from him didn't even know what they were holding. One handed him an envelope and said, "My girlfriend's gonna love this." Patrick almost laughed. Andrea never asked about the watch display being gone. She assumed he was decluttering. She hated dusting it. In its place, he set a potted snake plant. Something that looked alive but required nothing from him. Then came the barbecue at the Delgados. More wine. More performative charm. Andrea wore the necklace he gave her and referred to it as a miracle of taste from a man who thinks khaki is a personality. That got a laugh. Then, mid-conversation with Marla, half-drunk, too loud, Andrea said it again. "Honestly, Marla, you'd probably make a better wife than me. At least you'd flirt back." Silence. Then a few awkward laughs. Patrick was mid-sip. He didn't flinch. Marla turned to him, eyes amused but something else flickering behind them. "You hear that?" she asked. He met her gaze, raised his glass in a slow, dry toast. "Noted," he said. No smile. No warmth. Just acknowledgement. That silence, rippled more than any comeback could. The laughter didn't recover right away. People shifted in their chairs. Changed subjects. The air turned brittle. But Andrea didn't notice. She was already on her second sangria and back to talking about some interior design trend she'd half understood from TikTok. Patrick did notice who looked uncomfortable, who avoided his eyes, who laughed too long, too hard, trying to smooth the moment. He filed them away. They were the audience. They had seen the opening act. What they didn't know, what Andrea didn't know, was that the headliner hadn't even taken the stage yet. He went home that night and sat at his desk in the guest room. Opened the manila folder labeled Winter Plan. Added 3 more lines. Call insurance agent for individual policy quote. Transfer second watch payment to business account. Schedule appraisal for garage tools. Meanwhile, Andrea fell asleep on the couch, half a glass of red still in her hand. Bravo reruns murmuring into the dark. She joked that Marla might make a better wife. Marla laughed. Patrick didn't. But he did take the hint. And if Andrea thought this was still just banter, she had no idea what it looks like when the useless husband starts planting seeds. Because seeds are funny things. They grow underground, in silence, until the moment they break the surface and change everything. The game night was the usual suburban circus. Someone brought artisanal popcorn. Another couple brought their toddler and let her roam like a drunk raccoon. Andrea drank too fast, too early, then played charades like she was auditioning for attention. Marla, of course, was there, always close to Andrea, always just a little closer to Patrick than necessary. She watched him throughout the evening like she was waiting for something to crack. It was almost midnight when the last couple left. Andrea disappeared upstairs after announcing she was too wine-tired to do dishes. No one offered to help clean. That part, as always, fell to Patrick. He was loading the dishwasher when Marla walked back in from the patio. She had her heels in her hand and a second glass of wine she hadn't touched. She leaned against the counter like she owned the kitchen. "You always do this?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Do what?" "Clean up. Stay quiet. Let her pretend you're invisible." He closed the dishwasher. "I like order." She tilted her head, watching him. "I know she doesn't see you," she said, voice lower now. "But I do." He turned to face her, raised one eyebrow. "See me?" Marla stepped closer. Her hand brushed his. "Any time you want to talk. I mean it." He didn't pull away, but he didn't move forward either. He just let the moment hang. Then he nodded once. "Thanks." She held his eyes a second too long, then slipped out the back door without another word. Upstairs, Andrea was already snoring. One arm flopped off the bed like she'd been dropped there. Patrick sat on the edge of the guest bed, phone in hand, staring at nothing for a while. Then he opened a tab and typed, "Best hidden voice recorders." He found one shaped like a car key fob, with a 15-hour battery and 64 gigabytes of memory. Ordered it with overnight delivery. Paid with the LLC card. The next morning, he told Andrea he was going to the hardware store. She didn't even look up from her phone. He drove to the P.O. box, picked up the package, and opened it right there in the car. Small, simple, discreet. That night, he tested it during dinner. Set it on the kitchen counter next to his real keys while Andrea babbled about a show where everyone betrayed everyone else. But it was so good. "Babe, you'd hate it." He nodded, said little. When she left to call her sister and rant about someone's baby shower drama, he retrieved the device. Clear audio. Every word. Perfect. The next few days, he carried it everywhere. Every gathering. Every girls' night where the husbands were expected to grill or fetch ice. Every moment Andrea got too loose-lipped or Marla got too close. Because now, Marla thought he was available. That she'd crack something open. She thought he was the neglected nice guy. She thought he needed a rescue. She thought her little kitchen hand touch had created a crack in the marriage wall. She was wrong. She hadn't created a crack. She'd walked into a trap. Patrick wasn't confused. He wasn't desperate. He wasn't even tempted. He was documenting. Because people tell the truth when they think you're weak. When they think you need them. He had no intention of sleeping with Marla. But he was absolutely going to use her. And the best part? She'd hand him the ammunition herself. Wrapped in red wine and innuendo. Let her keep talking. He was listening now. Andrea turned 42 like it was a national holiday. She planned the whole thing herself. Rented a party room at a winery, hired a private chef, bought matching birthday vibes shirts for her and her girlfriends. Patrick just nodded through it all, offering to cover half the cost like a good husband. She didn't even pretend to decline. Just said, "You're finally getting it," and transferred the rest to her Amex. In public, Patrick played the role. He smiled, complimented the decor, held her purse while she took endless group selfies with women who could recite the Real Housewives franchise in order of divorce settlements. He poured wine for the table, laughed at the right moments, offered to take pictures so the girls could all be in it. He even posed beside her in one. The one she captioned, "Still lucky after all these years, 2 hearts." But behind the scenes, the walls were hollowing out. That morning, while she was still at her birthday manicure, Patrick transferred the final $3,200 out of their joint checking. It went into the Kavanaugh workshop account, disguised as a vendor payment for event materials. The bank app chirped with a green checkmark. Clean, untouched. The necklace Andrea unwrapped at the party, delicate platinum with a blue sapphire that shimmered under the lights, was real. So was the surprise on her face when she saw it. "This is from you?" She blinked. Patrick smiled. "Thought you deserved something rare." She laughed. "Didn't think you had taste. Guess I stand corrected." He helped her clasp it around her neck. She beamed for photos, kissed him on the cheek like he was a retirement watch, and turned back to her audience. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the necklace wasn't a gift. Not really. It was listed under a corporate promotional expense. The receipt filed under Client Appreciation, Marquee Partner. The card used to buy it, business credit tied to the LLC. Tax deductible. Technically not even hers. He could repossess it tomorrow if he wanted to. But he wouldn't. That would be loud. Patrick didn't do loud. Instead, he let her wear it all night like a trophy. Let her show it off to her friends. Let her believe that maybe, just maybe, the old Patrick was still buried under all that beige. That this was his way of saying he still loved her. That he'd forgotten the jokes, the whispers, the text threads he now had archived on a hidden drive labeled Threaded Reality. She toasted him at dinner. "To my rock," she said. "He may be quiet, but he's still full of surprises." Her friends odd. Patrick raised his glass, nodded once. A waiter snapped a picture. She'd frame it later. A moment of renewed love. In truth, it was the moment he'd closed the final vault door. The last string cut. There was now not a single dollar in a shared account that wasn't either a decoy or spent already. The house? Still in both names, but she hadn't noticed the insurance policy had quietly changed. Nor had she seen the transfer of the garage's contents to a different line item on his inventory sheet. He didn't need to take anything from her. He just needed her to keep assuming he wouldn't. And she was helping more than she knew. After the party, Andrea passed out with her makeup half on and her shoes still strapped. Patrick sat in the guest room, lit only by the blue glow of his laptop, updating a spreadsheet labeled Closure Plan. He checked off the final item under Joint Liquid Assets. Then added a new line under Psychological Anchors Removed. Public Display of Affection. Controlled. Gift misinterpreted as emotional investment. Complete. Social proof of status quo. Reinforced. He leaned back, closed the laptop, and smiled for the first time that night. She thought she was adored. She had no idea she'd just unwrapped her own decoy. It happened on a Sunday. The kind of day where everything looks still from the outside. Patrick was upstairs fixing a curtain rod. One of the many invisible husband tasks that get noticed only when left undone. Andrea had been on the deck earlier, posting filtered photos of her breakfast bowl with the caption, "Self-Care Sundays 2 Hearts," and sipping a mimosa like it was a prescription. She'd left her laptop open on the kitchen island, untouched except for Spotify still playing her Confidence Queen playlist. Patrick walked past it on his way to grab a screwdriver. Didn't mean to look, but the subject line caught him like a hook to the ribs. Ugh. Him again faced with tears of joy. The sender Marla G. The recipient Andrea. The timestamp 3 months ago. He didn't open it right away. He stood there, screwdriver in one hand, breath caught in his throat. Then slowly, carefully, he slid into the chair and tapped the touchpad. The thread expanded like a wound. Marla. She's bored with him. You said that last year. Andrea. Still true, Marla. You'll keep him around until something better comes along. Safety net. Andrea. He's barely a person anymore. He just exists. Marla. That's what makes him convenient. Quiet men don't ask questions. Andrea. Exactly. Furniture with a pulse. Patrick blinked. Once, twice. Then he reached for his phone, not to text, not to call. He opened the camera. Took 5 photos of the screen, every line, every timestamp. Then ejected the USB drive already plugged into the side of the machine, inserted his own, and copied the entire inbox folder from Andrea's email app. 10 minutes. That's all it took. Years of gaslighting, jokes, side eyes, and now it had a file name. A file path. Metadata. He removed the USB, placed it in a labeled envelope, and sealed it like evidence. She'd made it easy. Too easy. She left the laptop open not because she trusted him, but because she didn't see him. Not really. Not anymore. A few minutes later, she walked back into the house. Didn't even glance at him. Hey babe. Did you fix the curtain rod? Almost, he said, slipping the envelope into a padded case under the guest room floorboard. Just needed a different bit. Later that night, she asked him if he'd take her car in for service next week. He agreed without hesitation, drove it to the mechanic she trusted. And while it was there, he made sure the backup GPS sync was quietly disconnected from her shared iCloud, just in case. That same evening, he printed the email exchange on 24 pounds. Ivory bond paper, folded it neatly, tucked it into a hardback copy of The Art of Stillness that sat untouched on their bookshelf. She'd called him furniture. He'd become architecture, permanent, structural, and entirely uninterested in seeking validation from the people inside the house. This wasn't heartbreak. This wasn't even revenge. This was inventory, control, documentation. The jokes were never funny, but this was brutal. Because now it wasn't just humiliation at a party, or flirtation in the kitchen, or whispered side chatter from someone with a wine glass and a savior complex. Now it was text, black and white, time-stamped contempt. Proof that her cruelty wasn't accidental, it was policy. Patrick didn't confront her, didn't hint at it, didn't change his tone. He even complimented her dinner that night, store-bought lasagna reheated and served with a flourish. And while she basked in the illusion that he was still comfortably neutered, he added one more line to his internal ledger. Evidence of intent. Acquired. She thought he didn't notice, but she was right about one thing. He existed, and soon she'd wish he didn't. Patrick didn't announce his withdrawal. That would have given it away, would have made it dramatic, reactive. And Patrick, by design now, was neither. It began with the PDA. Andrea reminded him twice that he had the quarterly meeting coming up. "You're the only dad on the board," she chirped. Like that was a badge and not a leash. Patrick nodded. Then, that Thursday, he didn't go. He didn't offer an excuse. Didn't fake a conflict. He just didn't show. Andrea only found out because Linda from next door texted her. "Everything okay?" Patrick missed the meeting. "Hope it wasn't something serious." She asked him about it casually over morning coffee. "You forgot your meeting?" Patrick sipped. Didn't forget. Just didn't feel like going. That was it. 2 days later, he skipped her cousin's baby shower, a gathering Andrea had demanded they attend. When she brought it up, he simply said, "You'll be fine without me." He wasn't wrong. No one there asked where he was. At home, he started spending more time in the guest room. The first night, he blamed his snoring. "Didn't want to wake you." She didn't fight it. In fact, she seemed relieved. On night 3, she knocked once on the guest door and asked if he wanted to watch their usual Thursday show. He opened the door halfway. "I already started it. Want me to restart?" She hesitated. "Nah, you can finish it." She never asked again. And that's how the retraction continued. Polite, bloodless, invisible. He didn't slam doors or raise voices. He didn't stop doing things entirely. He just chose the ones that left no trace. He'd still fix the sink, still mow the lawn, but he stopped restocking her almond milk, stopped warming her car on cold mornings, stopped asking how her Pilates class went. And then came the late work meetings. At first, he used them sparingly, once every 2 weeks, then weekly. By the third time, Andrea barely raised an eyebrow. "Got a late call tonight," he said while washing his plate. "Still with that weird new vendor?" He shrugged. "You know how West Coast teams are. Everything's urgent after 6. She rolled her eyes. "Whatever. Just don't fall asleep in there." What she didn't know was that the guest room now had a separate internet connection, paid through the LLC, and a laptop she hadn't seen before. It didn't hold spreadsheets or meetings. It held folders, names, receipts, voice memos, timelines. Everything was organized, color-coded. One night, as Patrick sat reviewing a PDF of their prenup, highlighting sections she hadn't read in 15 years, his phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. "Marla, still on for Friday?" Smirking face. He didn't answer right away, just looked at the message, smirking. Andrea had been walking past the hallway. She caught the faint glow from his phone through the cracked door. Paused. Quiet. He knew she saw it. Knew she paused long enough to read that one line. The next morning, she didn't ask about it. But her tone at breakfast was different. A little too bright. A little too casual. "So, what's happening Friday?" Patrick looked up from his toast. "Catching up with an old friend." She nodded, but the movement was stiff. "Anyone I know?" "Probably," he said, voice smooth. Small town. She didn't push, just tapped her nails against her mug and said, cool. Like it wasn't eating her alive. And he smiled, not big, not smug, just enough to let the silence stretch. That night, she wore mascara to bed. He noticed. She was starting to feel it, the drift. The small, precise separation of gears that once made their life move smoothly. She didn't know where it was leading, but she sensed it. Patrick wasn't reacting anymore. He was preparing to disappear in plain sight. And all she could do now was pretend it didn't terrify her. Saturday arrived with the usual promise. Lawnmower noise, fresh coffee, bacon if she was lucky. Andrea rolled over in bed expecting the faint hum of routine, the smell of domesticity. But all she got was stillness. No mower, no kitchen clatter, no clink of his thermos on the counter. Just a hollow quiet that sat like fog in the house. She checked her phone, no missed texts, no notes. Weird. Slipping into her robe, she padded downstairs. The coffee pot was cold. The blinds still shut. No breakfast in progress, no lawn tools laid out. Just the echo of her own footsteps on tile. Patrick, she called half-heartedly. Nothing. Then she saw it. A single manila envelope on the kitchen counter. No label. Just sitting there, still, centered, deliberate. Her stomach tightened. She opened it with one hand, already sensing she wouldn't like what was inside. The first thing she saw, a printed email thread. He's barely a person anymore. Furniture with a pulse. She stopped breathing. Pages followed, screenshots, bank transfers, asset sheets. Receipts tied to her name but paid from accounts she didn't know existed. All carefully highlighted, annotated. And at the bottom of the stack, divorce papers. Filed, dated, signed. His section was done. Hers, blank. She reached for her phone, hand trembling, and dialed. Straight to voicemail. No ring. No option to leave a message. She tried again. Again. Nothing. She called from the landline. Same result. Then she texted, "Where are you? Call me. Is this a joke?" No reply. Just the green bubbles of messages not going through. Not even delivered. She sprinted upstairs, heart thudding, and yanked open the bedroom closet. His side half empty. Shoes gone. Socks. Suits. That old leather duffel she hated. All gone. She opened drawers. Nothing. Guest room? Cleared. Garage? Sparse. The toolbox, the old black Craftsman, was gone too. Andrea stumbled back into the house. Dazed. Pacing in circles like a mouse in a maze that had suddenly changed walls. Then it hit her, Marla. She texted her in a blur. "Have you seen him? Did you two meet Friday? Answer me, please." No response. Andrea opened the laptop. Tried logging into the bank. 2 accounts closed. 1 frozen. The last had a balance of $64.32. She let out a choked sound. Not quite a scream. More like a slow collapse. This wasn't a tantrum. It was a message. He didn't yell. Didn't slam the door. Didn't make a scene. He simply stopped. Stopped fixing the gutters. Stopped mowing the lawn. Stopped playing the part of the furniture with a pulse. And what he left behind wasn't chaos, it was clarity. Andrea sat on the floor, the envelope open beside her. Surrounded by paper evidence of everything, she thought he was too dull to notice. Too harmless to weaponize. Too mild to act on. But he had acted. With spreadsheets. With timestamps. With precision that felt surgical. She looked around their perfect kitchen, the one she'd bragged about in stories, in posts, in dinner party anecdotes where Patrick was always the quiet punchline. Now it was just quiet. Not peaceful. Not gentle. Vacant. He had left her everything she ever joked about. And taken with him everything she thought she could afford to lose. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, expensive, real stationery, the kind people don't use anymore. Andrea nearly tossed it, assuming it was another realtor pitch or wedding invite from someone she didn't care about. But the name stopped her. P.L. Kavanaugh. She hadn't seen those initials in years. Patrick's middle name, Lawrence, was something she mocked once in bed after a few too many drinks. "Sounds like a stuffy attorney who sleeps with a briefcase," she joked. He didn't laugh. She opened the envelope with a sudden rush of unease. Inside, a single card, minimalist design, embossed lettering. The Reclaimed Quiet. A photographic study by P.L. Kavanaugh. Opening night, 7:30 p.m. Halstead Collective Gallery. She blinked. Photography? He hadn't picked up a camera in over a decade. Not since before their marriage. He used to love film, darkrooms, used to talk about the way shadows told the truth better than light ever could. But he gave it up. She'd convinced him it was a time suck. Unless you're Ansel Adams, what's the point? She once said. After he spent 3 hours developing a photo of a rain-soaked fence, she told herself she wouldn't go. Then told herself it might be closure. Then told herself it might be a way back in. At 7:29, she slipped in through the side entrance of the Halstead Collective. Alone in black, makeup flawless like armor. The gallery was softly lit. White walls, soft jazz, the murmur of patrons sipping wine. A dozen large black and white images hung in quiet rows. Every single one depicted an object. A faucet, a torn shoelace, a dented thermos, a pair of work gloves frayed at the cuffs. Each was captioned with one word: overlooked, repurposed, discarded, misnamed, expected, ignored. She walked slowly, heart rising into her throat. At the center of the room was a glass case. Inside it, a stained barbecue apron. His apron, the one he always wore. The one she once threw in the trash and he quietly pulled back out. The placard beside it read, "Low maintenance, high value." The room was silent, reverent, as if it understood something she never had. Andrea stared at the case, willing herself not to cry. And that's when she saw her, Marla, standing by the far wall, arms crossed, staring at a photo of a folded lawn chair. Alone, dressed well but hollow around the eyes. Andrea turned to leave, panicked. Too late. Marla spotted her and smiled. Not smug, not cruel, just knowingly. Andrea didn't speak, just pivoted toward the exit. But before she could vanish, her path crossed a woman in her 20s holding a gallery program. "Did you see the artist yet?" she asked Andrea brightly. "His work's devastating, like stillness as revenge." Andrea froze. The girl didn't wait for a reply. "They say he doesn't speak at openings, just watches." Then she walked on. Andrea scanned the room, now fully paranoid. Was he here? Watching? Every patron suddenly felt like a mirror. She left through the same side door she came in, heels echoing too loudly in the alley. Outside, the street was quiet, chilly. She stood under a street lamp for a moment and read the program she grabbed on the way out. A single quote opened the exhibit. "When someone tells you they don't see you, don't shout louder. Disappear more fully. P. L. Kavanaugh." Andrea folded the paper with trembling fingers. The man she mocked for years had become a curator of silence. And now the silence was speaking fluently, elegantly, publicly. He hadn't just vanished. He'd transformed. And every person in that room was admiring the wreckage she never even saw happening. The court envelope was thin, but the damage inside wasn't. Andrea tore it open with a sense of dread she couldn't place, until she saw her own name listed next to a title transfer. Effective immediately. The house was no longer hers. Correction, it never was. The prenup, signed in the dizzy sparkle of their early months, stated that should the marriage dissolve, the house, originally in Patrick's family, reverted back to the Kavanaugh Trust unless a certain clause was renegotiated by the 10th anniversary. They'd never renegotiated, because she forgot it existed. She read the rest twice. The kitchen went cold around her. The car? Leased under his business. Technically a corporate asset. The credit card? Cancelled. The backup savings account she always assumed was mutual? Frozen. There were no fights, no messages, just official, notarized detachment. She called 3 friends. 2 didn't answer. 1 replied, "I'm not picking sides." That phrase again. Not picking sides. Which always meant they already had. That night, she drove to Marla's condo. No appointment, no warning. Just showed up in sweatpants and eyes swollen from the tears she'd sworn she'd never shed. Marla opened the door in a silk robe, holding a glass of wine. Not surprised. Not welcoming. Andrea didn't even say hello. "Did you ever, you and him?" Marla leaned on the doorframe, brow slightly arched. "You think that's still the point?" Andrea's voice cracked. "Just tell me. Did you sleep with him?" A beat. Then, "No." Andrea exhaled. Relief? Confusion. It was tangled. Marla took a long sip of wine and studied her. "He asked me one question a while back. That night in your kitchen." Andrea blinked. "What question?" Marla straightened. "He asked if I'd trade places with you." The words hit like glass cracking from the inside. Andrea stared. And you said. I said no. Silence. Andrea tried to form something. Anger, sarcasm, defense. But all that came was, why? Marla's lips curved, not a smile. Something sadder. Because he's not wallpaper, Andrea. He's the whole wall. You just painted over him and called it a renovation. Andrea stepped back like she'd been slapped. Marla didn't shut the door. She didn't have to. Andrea turned and left without another word. She sat in her car in the dark, unable to drive. Across the street, Christmas lights flickered in someone else's window. Couples inside, laughing. Inside her purse, her phone buzzed. A promotional email from a yoga studio she hadn't visited in months. Rediscover your center. She deleted it without opening. Patrick hadn't left with rage. He hadn't thrown her into chaos. He'd left her intact, with all her furniture, all her trinkets, all her curated social media memories. He hadn't taken anything, except the narrative. Now, people whispered differently. They saw her not as the quirky, chaotic wife married to the quiet rock, but as the one who mocked the foundation until it crumbled. And Patrick? He didn't need to reply to her texts. He didn't need to post revenge quotes. He let her silence become its own echo chamber. She drove home, alone. The house felt rented, temporary, a museum of their shared life, now curated by absence. And in the quiet, she finally understood. He never wanted to be loud. He just wanted to matter. And when she made him the joke, he rewrote the punchline. Now she was the echo. And he was the wall she'd painted over, thinking she was the artist. But he was the one who signed the canvas. The silence didn't just speak, it judged, and it walked away.